This episode, mold in your home, what you need to know. Folks, if you think you have mold in your home, well, actually, folks, you have mold in your home, period. Everybody's got mold in their home, whether they believe it or not. Don't care how clean you are, you've got mold in your home. We're going to discuss what you need to know about mold, what's dangerous, what's not dangerous, and also how to prevent mold, and also maybe a little bit of discussion about what's, quote, bad mold. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This show's entitled Mold in Your Home, What You Need to Know. And to help me explain, I am here with the guy that has mold on the side of his head. He's so old,
the moldiest house in the neighborhood.
That's right. Mr. Johnny. Johnny, what has been going on this week? What do you got cooking?
You know what I did? I just reseeded my yard. We'll talk about that some other time, but yeah, aerate and reseed my yard. So it's already
That's
starting
a great
to come
Southern
up.
tradition, folks. If you're not used to it, it's an Atlanta tradition because nothing grows here naturally.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much everywhere, to tell you the truth. But yeah, one of my neighbors is he works for a large company that owns a lot of landscaping places, and bought some seed from him. Really good stuff. It's already coming up. So excited to see.
You know, I don't overseed my yard because it really makes my weeds look bad.
Yeah. So there's that.
We're going completely natural. We just let whatever grows grow. It's beautiful. It works out great. All right, folks. Before we get started, we would ask you to like and subscribe if you like this show. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps get the word out there. It helps the algorithm figure out if we can help some other people out. That's it in a nutshell. All right, Johnny. Mold. How would you recognize if you have a mold problem?
Oh, well, like you said, everybody has mold. It's in one form or fashion. Before the show,
you bring bread in the house, you got mold.
Yeah, right. Now,
and it's airborne.
Yeah, but we're going to be discussing kind of the stuff that kind of gets on it's on everybody's mind about house mold, right? And that's kind of the black stuff.
Black stuff.
So, when you
How do you know if you have a mold problem, Johnny?
You can see it.
You can see it, or
you
smell
can
it.
see it. A lot of people can really react to it in a bad way, from a respiratory. And it's no joke. Some of that stuff is no joke. And I think there's a couple of different molds that you might want to discuss, but it's one of those things where if it gets wet somewhere, you'll see. I've got it on some of my drywall out in the garage. That I've killed over it's just the water splashing in there. From rainstorm or whatever.
And it never gets fully dried out. That's what it is.
Yeah, and then when it does, there's still, you can see spots, and I'll kill it every once in a while. But
Yep. Yeah, that's basically how do you know if you have a mold problem? You're going to see it. In most cases, you're going to see it or smell it. Either way, it's one or the other, and you'll smell kind of that musty smell. Now, remember, mildew is not technically a mold, but it is just like looks like a mold, and it's black.
So why don't you talk about that, because that's a good point. A lot of people, let's say that they get some things wet, underneath a counter or underneath a cabinet or whatever, and it'll mildew.
Right.
And a lot of people will kind of panic. I got black mold. That's the big thing, right? That's the scary thing is the whole
black mold thing.
Yes.
Right. So understand this is partly black mold is real. I'm not going to say it's not. And it does affect people in a negative way if you have prolonged exposure to it, right? So prolonged, when I say prolonged, it means a year or more. All right. So honestly, and there's another thing to understand, that there are many, many different types of mold, and there's two that are technically dangerous. Those two molds they have a very narrow window of environment that they can grow in. And the chances of you actually having black mold are in most places in the United States are very, very minimal because they don't meet. It has a very narrow temperature range. It's usually, if you live in the South, usually it's Florida for the most part, and the deep South, down along coastal areas in the southeastern United States. That's where you get black mold. Why is black mold in the public conscience? Well, because companies figured out that they can sell this to the mass populations and incite fear and make more sales because you've got to clean up the mold. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to be negative on those. Those people are out to make money. And if you have a problem, if you actually have black mold, you have an issue that you need to rectify, right? And it's a serious thing. But mildew, which is another fungi, all molds are a fungi, and they're basically in nature, they're designed to break down wood and eat up things in the natural way. That's what they do. They're in the soil. When I say it's everywhere, it's everywhere. There's like 6 million mold spores per cubic inch of air. I can't remember the exact number. It's something like that's a huge amount. The problem that we get as human beings is we get mold in places like our bathrooms, and it's either mold or mildew, and it's black and it's very unsightly. And it does sometimes have a musty smell if you don't get proper air flowing around it. But that musty smell that you smell is usually mildew. It's not mold. It's usually mildew. And mildew is just another type of fungus that grows in the similar areas to mold. So what are those areas that mold grows in, John?
Well, mostly you'll find it in your bathroom. You'll find it in your basement. If you have a problem, that's usually where that's part of it. That's where it'll be sticking its ugly head out of. Anything
Correct.
That's wet, damp, not really has a chance to dry out.
Damp and warm.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah.
And warm is relative.
Yeah.
The mold that grows in your basement is different, but it is damp. It has to be damp. It has to be wet in some way or another. And like mold really likes steam, like not necessarily steamy areas, but humid air. It's the humid air that it likes the most.
Yeah.
That's why your basement gets mold.
Well,
because the air in your basement's generally pretty humid if you're subterranean. If you
got that's what happens is like when trees grow, they suck up mold spores.
Yes, they do.
And, so you bring in all that lumber into your house and the
got
wood seals it all up most of the time. But if the wood gets too wet, those spores start to come out.
Correct.
And that's where all this stuff comes from. It's not that you open the door and all of a sudden they all flew in. They can actually just come right out of your lumber your existing lumber.
It's true, but it does come in.
It will. But
it's
in
every
scenario,
you can't get it is in almost in everything and everywhere. It literally is everywhere.
And this is why, like around showers and stuff, and once the showers start to leak, and the wood continues to stay wet, some of the structure, the spores start to come out, and now you've got mold, and it's kind of fosters itself to the point where it gets behind everything, and you're like, oh well, I'm just gonna clean this down, and it's like, no, it's behind there, and it's coming out. So
yeah, and it's a fungi, right? And what is our favorite thing is our wood rot is caused by
fungus.
A fungus.
Yeah.
So it's the same. It does help to break down wood a little bit, but not like wood rot mold. Wood rot fungus is extremely aggressive. We'll leave it at that. But those same things happen. They happen together. They work in unison, right? So if you have mold, you're on your way to having wood rot. It's really that simple. And like Johnny's saying, if you have a leak up underneath your tub or something, and you realize you don't realize it until you start smelling mold, you need to take the drywall down and take a look. Get it dried out and get it cleaned out, because it's on the way to wood rot, which then is now you got a big problem, right?
Yeah. So, remember that? Let me just take a side note on. Remember that stuff that big thing that was going on with that Chinese wallboard?
Yes.
Remember that stuff that they imported from China? And
what was the issue with it? I don't remember.
It was all moldy.
It was moldy.
And it was the black mold. It was the really bad stuff. So So I think at the time, I think we were bringing in all that wallboard. There was something going on with the American some business, the wallboard. I can't remember exactly what that was. You guys out there can check me on that.
But they ripped down a ton of it. I mean,
and they started to use that stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the homes down in Florida, and it was a 2-story. It was a nice house that thing sat vacant for year over year over year. I couldn't believe it because it was all filled with Chinese wallboard, and they had to take the whole thing down.
Yeah, you have to take the whole. Yeah, eventually it gets so bad you have to take because you can't get it out. You can't
get it out.
If you don't get it off the surface, once it gets embedded, it's done. Right. Yeah. So all right. So anyway, yeah, it's a good aside, Johnny. So I guess the question, how do you prevent mold growth in your home, right? What's the prevention things? Well, there's a couple of different steps. One is make sure that you have good ventilation, particularly in places that are damp, bathrooms, garages, in your basement, and what is good ventilation? Just move the air.
Yeah, move the air, get the humidity out. Dehumidifiers are really important in those places. Yes. So if you have a mold issue that you just can't seem to get rid of, in those places, you're probably going to wind up putting in dedicated dehumidifiers to keep, because sometimes you can't. The dampness just is it's just overwhelming.
Again, in basements that are semi-subterranean or semi-subterranean, meaning they're underground, you're going to have a hard time getting the water out without a dehumidifier. Yep. It's just the way.
That's just the way it is now. I will tell you that I've got a dehumidifier that I use all the time in the basement, and when that thing, if it stops or it's or if I haven't turned it on for the season, I'll come down there and I will start to smell that basement. You can start to smell the dampness coming. Starting to appear.
That's the beginning. It's the mildew.
Around the 50% mark, 50 to 60% percentage on humidity is good, but the basements or anything like you said, subterranean, it'll that humidity level is going to rise real fast.
Really fast. If you do, folks, if you do have a place upstairs where you have constant mold, I'm going to give an example. I had a rental. had a rental house. I don't have it anymore, but I had a rental house where the one corner of the house was always getting mold on it, and I was originally mad at the tenant because I'm like, you need to clean your house every once in a while, right? And anyway, long story short, he had a water main leak that I did not know about until much later when he told me, hey, do you know why my water bill is $200 a month? I'm like, how long has it been this way? Oh, more than a year. I was like, you should have told me a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Long story short, the water, house was on a slab, but the water line broke just off the front of the front corner of the house. And the water was actually permeating up through the concrete up into the walls.
Oh yeah, that's a perfect scenario for that.
And that one corner of the house could never get it clean, and we ended up taking that portion of the wallboard down after we stopped the leak, and I just cut out a section because I can do that, it's my own labor, but I took it out just to make sure, and I got behind it, and thank God there was no mold on the inside of the walls or anything like that, and I just replaced the pieces of drywall. But if you have mold someplace and you can't ever seem to get rid of it, not talking about a bath, talking about some other place in the house, it's an indication of other things are going on. Now, bathrooms, right, John? Bathrooms, run your fans, folks. Run your fans.
Yeah, run your fans. And I'll just add this too. Just when you were mentioning that coming up through the concrete, if your house is built before, let's say 1980, in the 80s, 85.
It was in the 80s sometime, yeah.
They didn't put a vapor barrier underneath the concrete.
Right. Yep.
So that's a bad situation if for mold. That's the moisture is always going to be coming through the concrete.
Through the concrete, yeah.
And it's kind of funny because even if you put a dehumidifier in there, this is how bad it can be. Because the long time ago, if you're living with one of those pre-1980 homes or in the 70s, especially in the 60s, you could put a dehumidifier in those old basements. But the more you draw out of the basement, the more concrete sucks up. So you're chasing your tail kind of on that, which is really sad. It's just the way it is.
You told an interesting story, and I know this is a true thing. Your house you grew up in was in Chicago, and it was on a full basement thing, right? I mean, a full basement
Yeah, foundation.
foundation.
Yeah.
And folks, I hate to say this, your dad was going to refinish it down there or something?
Well, we refinished it. I mean,
you refinished it, but you never got the water out of there, did you?
You can't right, because you can't stop the moisture coming up through the concrete.
Right.
That's the big problem. And those basements were designed back then not to be lived in.
Not to be lived in. That's where I was going with that. If you've got a house that does not have a vapor barrier, it's not really designed to be lived in the basement.
Yeah, so there's other ways that
storage.
you can stop that, but it's going to cost you a fortune.
It's going to
like
cost
a new
you
house, but it was just one of those things.
Yeah, because at the time nobody thought about it. That's what it was. So when you look at some of these older homes and you want to refinish the basements, live in it for, as we always say, live in the house for a little while, determine if there's an issue there or not. You'll know, because you'll know.
Well, what you do is you put a piece of plastic down on it, for 24 hours, and then if it's moist, underneath the plastic, you got some issues to deal with to take care of.
And there are some ways to waterproof from the inside out, things like that, if it's not too bad. So anyway, we're not going to get into that. This is just a little bit of knowledge for your own, just so you understand that not everything is not everything is to current code. Let's just leave it at that. So prevention, right, Johnny, to prevent mold. We're going to go through a couple of different things, but one way that so it's not that you're preventing the mold.
How to get rid of it. I mean,
you're preventing mold growth, right?
Yeah.
Is what you're doing. Yeah. That's what you're doing. So the first thing really is get the air flowing, right? So make sure, like when you're in the bathroom and you're running the hot shower, run the fan. Don't not run the fan. If you don't have a fan, maybe you should put one in. Or in the old code said you had to have a window. Well, you need to open your window. That's always the dumbest thing. I never understood that. But anyway, whatever. Need to open the window, let the moist air out. That's the first thing. Check for any water leaks. We talk about water leaks all the time, right, John?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very destructive.
Yeah.
So roof leaks, plumbing leaks, drainage issues. It's funny. I just had a call from a client after the big rain. We had the hurricane came through. We had the big rain, and she had a basement water problem. And lo and behold, her grade was off, way off. I mean, her grade was at about a 45-degree angle towards the house. I said, well, there's your issue right there. I said, dig it. We dug a trench out and fixed it. And no more water. What a surprise. What a surprise. Look for damp spaces and crawl spaces, things like that. Steam from the bathroom and kitchen too. Same thing in the kitchen. If you cook a lot with water, honestly, run your overhead fan, draw the air out, just draw the air out. It's not as bad in kitchens usually, because kitchens are a little more open, but bathrooms for sure. Here's another. This is one that I don't think of often, except on cold mornings like yesterday. It's starting to cool off. I hate that. Condensation. So understand, on cool surfaces you get condensation, and lots of times that it happens around windows, around the corners in your windows and stuff. It's a combination of both mold, and then you'll get wood rot there as a result of it being of the windows condensing. Water gets on there, and it never really dries out. There's other things, wet clothes in the home, and don't vent your dryers inside the house, right? So if you've got a dryer.
Well, especially gas dryers.
Well,
but yes, listen. I know that they make that
thing that'll
indoor thing for electric dryers. I'm like,
right.
I've been in plenty of homes where that. I mean, it's really damp around there, and I think I'm always thinking to myself, man, how you guys getting away with this? Really,
you're not,
without other problems.
You're not.
It's not my thing.
So so those are those, and then just basically ventilation, just in general. Just make sure that you have good airflow through the home. I mean, you just and it just means moving it. It doesn't take much. It just needs to move the air a little bit. If you think about all the places where mold grows, basements, crawl spaces, how much air movement is there usually in a basement?
Well,
nothing.
Yeah, and if you kind of think of it, what we said, or what you were saying earlier, wood can get wet.
Yes.
But when wood stays wet, that's wet. So just kind of think about that, folks. If you're kind of going through this, You know, why is the wood stain wet?
Yeah.
You know, and how do I mitigate that?
Yeah. How do I mitigate that? So there's that. And one of the other things too is, especially in your bathrooms and your kitchens and things like that, you do need to clean on a regular basis, and you need to clean with something that will disrupt the mold's life cycle. Here in the South, we have this thing called pink mold. It literally is, what would you call it, Johnny? I mean, it's a mold, but
I can't remember. I can't remember what they call it. It's just it's kind of harmless, but it's a it just really starts to foster itself around sink drains and things like that.
Yeah, bathtubs. I see it a lot in bathtubs and stuff. And it's literally pink in color. It's quite unsightly. It's not dangerous or anything, but it's kind of gross.
But it's also it's easy to get rid of.
Oh, it's super easy to get rid of. All you have to do is clean it with any kind of very vinegar, or you can use bleach if you want to, but vinegar will take it away. Even just soap will take it away. All you have to do is rub it with a sponge, you know. And same thing with most mildews. Now, if the black stains are getting into your caulk and stuff, you're going to have to use some kind of a bleach product. And there are many products out there to take care of mold, so we're not going to get into specific ones. But there's lots of ways to actually clean the mold off, even outside, right, John? We talk about it all the time about you take Dawn and a little bit of bleach and you put it in your sprayer and you spray the outside of your house, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see it building up right around everywhere.
It's green here
all
on the outside. Black.
Well, you got algae. I've had the black stuff growing all over, and you just got to keep. It gets really unsightly. It's on my siding and stuff at certain points and stuff. Just if you can bleach it down, man. I wash my house down twice a year. It's easy. Yeah. It really is easy, and it gets rid of all of that.
It takes it all down, and it has a preventative nature to it, where it actually keeps it away for a while, not forever, but it keeps it away for about, like in John's case, and trust me, we live in Atlanta, which y'all probably know that by now, but we live in the greater Atlanta area, and this is a hot, humid place. This is mold and mildew heaven. Yeah, it's
probably like the rest of all you folks out there that are listening in Houston.
Well, Houston, right?
In Florida, the rest of
this is not Arizona, baby.
No, this is not. Yeah, this is not Arizona.
So anyway, if you live in a hot, humid area, you've got exterior mold as well, which you're going to have to clean off eventually. I mean, you don't have to, I suppose, but it's great for business, right, John? Because wood rot is, one of our great places to do things. But so a couple other things on mold. If you have mold in your house, should you get it tested? I would say only if you really feel ill effects. If you start feeling really bad and you're not asthmatic, now understand, if you have breathing conditions in advance, you need to get rid of it, right? And you'll be aware of that on your own. But if you've got mold and all of a sudden you start not feeling so good, maybe then you have it tested. I'm not a big believer in it. I'm more a believer in just clean it, spray some vinegar on it, spray some bleach on it, get rid of it. It'll go away. If the bleach and the vinegar doesn't make you sick, then you're okay. And past that, it should go away. That's my opinion on that one. So renters, folks, you have a lot of mold and mildew. Johnny wanted to say something about renting.
Well, I mean, a lot of people, if it's not their home and they've never lived in a home before, let's talk about a rental home, not a rental apartment. Well, even in an apartment, you're not used to taking care of a home. And most people that are listening to this podcast or watch us on YouTube, you folks are taking care of your home. This is part of your whole thing. But, there's a lot of people out there that don't, so they don't know these things.
Right.
There can be a lot of neglect in those homes. I have been in some rental homes that were absolutely atrocious. I wouldn't live in them just from a health perspective. There's no way.
Right.
So,
but some of I'm going to take up for some landlords. Now, in our case, we do not allow mold to get anywhere, but a lot of it is you need to clean on a regular basis. That'll take care of a vast majority of it, particularly in bathrooms and things like that. If it's external, like I said on the other one with the water main break, we repaired that as soon as but I have to know, folks. If you think you've got a problem, talk to your landlord. Right?
I think this is a good. As we segue out of this, I think this is a good thing to talk about because for you landlords out there, not everybody's as as detailed as Larry is. But I think when you go to your properties, this is something to look for amongst other things that you're doing.
You should be.
But this is something to be aware of because it can lead to what Larry was talking about. You could have a leak. They could have a legitimate water leak somewhere that nobody knows about, but you kind of have to go through being Mr. Inspector when you go to your properties.
Yeah, you really do. You have to be aware of, you have to understand you take care of homes, you just take care of. It's very systematic. And you just have to take care of that stuff because the problem with water leaks are, as we all know, if you have a supply side plumbing leak, and it might be a very small leak now, it can turn into a very big leak in a matter of seconds, and then you have a flood, and then you run into a whole lot of issues that you don't want to run into. Johnny, one of my neighbors, we walk by his house, and I see all these water restoration company in his home, and they're ripping out everything. And come to find out, this was the same day as the hurricane passed over, which was really interesting. We thought it was hurricane damage, and it wasn't, because I started noticing they were taking like bathrooms out from upstairs. He had just a regular pipe break, and it flooded 2 floors of his house.
Oh, yeah.
And he's, bad news. So anyway, you got to keep up with your stuff.
Yep.
Is the point. It's very, very systematic. And so the signs that the signs that you might have mold, or you've got nasal or sinus congestion, not from allergies or anything like that, but you got itchy red eyes, you're maybe having difficulty breathing, you might be coughing, throat irritation, skin irritation, like a rash, or maybe a headache too. All of those things are symptoms. It's not a guarantee, because there's also a lot of other things that cause those things as well. But if you think you've got a mold problem, you have to address it. You just have to address it. And anything else we got on that, Johnny?
No, Larry, I think that's the end of it.
Johnny, question. Spaceship.
Do
they stick mold on you or not?
I got itchy, red, watery eyes. Something. I don't know what that's all about, but
yeah, I was thinking someplace else, but never mind. Anyway, we won't go
Larry.
there. I know, it's so bad. All right, folks, if you like the craziness we do here on the Handyman Pros Radio Show, please send us a message, questions at Handyman Pros Radio Show. We appreciate you listening. We certainly do. We have a lot of fun doing this. We hope we are educating you and trying to help you save time, money, and aggravation. It's really that simple. Johnny, take us home.
All right, folks. Stay safe, watch for mold, and have a great week. We'll see you next time on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.